I don't know what it is about rounding off that gets everybody confused, but somehow it does, even though we do it in primary school and we do it in grade 8, somehow it just causes either no issues for you or a whole lot of issues for you. So here's your chance to go over the basics, and then hopefully we can close some of the gaps that might have occurred for you. Alright, so I've just got a whole lot of random numbers and an indication as to how to round off. And I'm just going to go over how I'm thinking about it and what my options are at each point. Okay, so if I look at 2186, so I'm just reminding you we've got thousands, hundreds, tens, units. Okay, and I want to round off to the nearest 10. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the number, the digit in the place that comes after 10, so the one on the right hand side. So I'm actually going to look at the units, okay, and I put a little arrow in there to tell myself that's the guy I'm looking at. And that's the indicator, that's the one that tells me, do I go up or down on the 10 column? And the 6 over there is higher than 5. Well, it's 5 or higher, right? When I round off a number to the nearest 10, it means that the number must end in a 0, okay? If I was rounding off to the nearest 100, my number must end in 2 zeros. If I round off to the nearest 1,000, my number has to end, for my second example here, I've got to have something that finishes in 3 zeros. Okay, so that's going to help us with understanding what the options are. Okay, so 2186 must end in a 0. What are my options? It's either going to be 2180 or 2190. Those are my two options. And I think it's obvious now that because of that 6, which says I've got to go up 1, my answer is going to be 2190. Okay, and it ends in a 10, so that checks out. For question B, I'm going to round this off to the nearest 1,000. So my number has to end in 3 zeros. To get to the nearest 1,000, I need to talk about the number that comes after the nearest 1,000. So there's my 1,000 column, and the one that comes on the right-hand side is a 4. So that is the one that gets my little arrow. That's the one I'm looking at to indicate what am I dealing with, and does it go up or does it stay where it is. My options to end in 3 zeros are going to be 23,000 or 24,000, because I've got to have the 3 zeros, and it's either going to be where it is right now, which is on 23,000, or it's going to go up to 24,000. So I'm sure you can well imagine if that was a 9, we'd completely understand that it has to go up to the 24,000. It's just not as clear when there's a whole bunch of other numbers going on there. And we don't actually have to think about these two 9s, guys. We just have to look at the 4, because the 4 is the indicator as to what happens to the 3. Okay, so what are my options? 23,000, 24,000. Well, that's a 4. 4 tells us it stays exactly where it is, so it's just going to be 23,000. And you might call that rounding down, because I'm now not going to have the 499 in this number. It's going to essentially round down and be less than 23,499. For this next one, I'm rounding to the nearest 100, okay? So I need to have 2 zeros in my answer, and I need to look not at the 100, that's the one I'm going to decide whether it stays a 5 or goes to a 6, but I'm going to be looking at my indicator, which is the tens column. Okay, so my options are, the first 25 stays where it is, but either it's going to be 25,500, or it's going to be 25,600, because I've got to end in 2 zeros, and there's only going to be 2 options for that. And I think once you get your head around the fact that there's 2 options, picking one of the 2 instead of one of what sometimes feels like hundreds of options is so much easier. Okay, so I want to change or keep this 5 over here, and this indicator 5 tells me what to do. And it's telling me to take this 5 up. So this guy is going to be my answer. Okay, now I've got to deal with decimal places, and these are the ones we do use a lot more in maths than hundreds and thousands and so on. In fact, our most common one is this one, 2 decimal places. Okay, 1 decimal place. So I want to decide, what do I do with this guy? Does my 1 decimal place, my tenths column, does that stay at a 5 or does that go up to 6? And I'm going to learn how by looking at the hundredths column, the 2 decimal place column. So my options now, when I realize I've got to do 1 decimal place, it means that I've got to have something, 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 comma, 1 number. And then everything after that will fall away. So I've got to have comma, 1 number. Instead of saying I've got to end in zeros, I know I need to have 1 digit after the comma. So I can't have comma 566. It needs to be either 327, comma 5, or it needs to be 327, comma 6, because I can either keep that 5 the way it is, or it can go up to a 6. Okay, and you can see now, because my indicator, which is the 6, the second decimal place, that is a 6, which tells me, because it's 5 or more, it tells me that this guy goes up. So my answer is going to be 327, comma 6. For question E, I'm going to deal with 2 decimal places, okay, which means my answer has to go comma, digit, digit. And by the way, those digits can be 0, okay. And if I'm asked to round off to 2 decimal places and these end up being 0, I actually need to show them, okay, just to be completely pedantic and completely accurate. All right, 2 decimal places. So I'm going to put my dot there on the second decimal place because the 9, oh dear, it's a 9. 9s are tricky. Anyway, we can do it. The 9 either stays a 9 or it becomes a 10, which means my 3 would become a 4. And we need to look at that almost like as 39 might then go into 40. Okay, but my indicator is a 4. And 4 actually tells me, thank goodness, I don't have to take that 9 up. So what that's going to be is either 862, comma 39, or it's going to be 862, comma, what would it be if we took it up? It would be, comma 40. Because what do I need? I need 2 things after the comma, and those 2 things are either going to be what it is or the next one up from there. Okay, luckily it's this one, so it's going to be comma 39, but I'd like you to be aware that if that 4 was a 5, then this guy would be my answer over there. All right, a very similar number, and here I've got to do whole number, and I think this is probably the easiest one to do because we all instinctively round up to whole numbers. This has got to have nothing after the decimal point. Okay, so there's nothing there. It's got to literally end in a unit, and there can't be any decimal places. I've got to get rid basically of the 983, and I've got to decide then, is my answer going to be 862 the way it is right now, or is it going to be 863? And so I'm going to look at my indicator, which is that 9, and I think this one's quite obvious. The 9 is going to take it up, and so my answer will be 863. Okay, here we've got another 2 decimal places example. So I need to work with my second decimal place, that guy, but my indicator is the 8. The 8 is telling me that this 7 is going to go up. Okay, and remember that 2 decimal places means comma, digit, digit. So I'm going to have my 123, comma, digit, digit. The reason I can put this down is because I'm not dealing with 9s. When I deal with nines, as you'll see a bit later, I slow everything down and make sure that I know where I'm going with that. Okay, so it's going to be 123, 6 didn't need changing, but the 7 is going to go up to 8, not because this is an 8, but because my indicator tells me that my second decimal place digit needs to go up by 1. My options would have been 123,67 as it is, or 123,68. Here we've got 3 decimal places, and my options will be 472,446, the way it is, or 472,447. To deal with 3 decimal places, so to decide whether I do anything with that 6 or I leave it as a 6, I'm going to look at my indicator, which is the 4th decimal place, which is a 7. The 7 tells me that the 6 will go up, so it's going to be that guy. My answer will be 472,447. Okay, let's look at a few more, and let's pay particular attention when there are 9s involved. Okay. All right, nearest whole number, it's going to be 25 the way it is, or 26. It's a 5, which means it goes up, so that is 26. To the nearest 10, that is there, and here we're dealing with 9s again. I need to look at my units to tell me what to do. So remember that to the nearest 10 means I'm going to have a number that ends in a 0. Okay, and this number's got 3 digits in front of the comma, therefore it's going to be something something 0. Okay, so actually all of this stuff over here is just clutter, and I think that's also quite tricky to get your head around. Okay, so this 9 is my indicator for that 9. And finally we have an example where the 9 causes some issues. What are my options? 290, or what's the next one up? In terms of tens, it's going to be 300. It's got to be something that ends in a 0. So yeah, I could round down. If that was 292, I would round down to 290, right? But it's 299. I think because it's 299, you instinctively know that it's going to round up to 300, but I want you to understand the details as to why it's going to round up. And it is because of this 9 over here that I put the arrow on. This 9 tells me that the previous 9 has to go up. The previous 9 to go up would have to affect the 2. So my 29 would be a 30. Okay, so that's a way of looking at it that I find helpful. Okay, 2 decimal places here, and we've got 9s. So we've got 59,8989. 2 decimal places, so I want to look at the second decimal place, and therefore my indicator is going to be this 8 over there, which causes problems, because the 8 tells me that the 9 has to go up. Okay, let me get my head around what my options are. 2 decimal places. That means it has to go comma, digit, digit. So it's going to be the way it is. So remember when we round down, it'll be 59,89. Okay. What would my other option be? Because I need it to be something with 2 decimal places. So what's the next one? 59,90. Think about it. It needs to have numbers after the comma, but what would come after 89 if you look at it that way? It's going to have to be the 90. Okay, so here my indicator 8 tells me the 9 goes up. But when the 9 goes up, my little 89 here, that 89, I know it's not 89, but I'm calling it that to help you understand what we've got to do with it. That whole thing's got to go up. Because what's the next one up after 89 will be 90. So it's got to be this one. Okay, so I'm going to have 59,90, and here's the example where you must put that 0 in order to fulfill the instruction to round off to 2 decimal places. You must show 2 decimal places. Okay, for this one we're going to go 3 decimal places. So I'm going to look at the 9 and decide, does that change? And then the 3 needs to indicate, because that is the 4th decimal place. So I'm going to have 146,009 the way it is, or I'm going to have 146, okay, what will this be? Instead of 009, like what comes after 9 will be 10, so it'll be 010, which, look at it carefully, that is actually higher than 009. Okay, so what's it going to be? The 3 tells me leave it the way it is. Okay, which means my answer will be 146,009, and it rounds down. But what if we switch them? What if it's 39 instead of 93? Well, I'm still doing the same procedure, right? I'm still looking at the 9 to decide whether to change the 3. Okay, so here my options will be 146,003 or 146,004. And that 9 tells me that the 3 needs to go up. So my answer will be 146,004.